What is going on, everybody? It's your boy Gsluke here with a live stream for the RSM Classic, our last full field event of 2022. So we got to make it count. Got to make this one a fun one. So sit back, get ready for the slate. We're going to cover pretty much everything you need to know. And if there's something we don't touch on, well, that's what the live chat's for, right? This is your time to ask questions, get an idea of what you need to know for Showdown, for 4-round stuff, cash, prize picks, whatever the case may be, we'll touch on it, as long as it's golf related. And hey, it doesn't even have to be for DFS this week. If you're looking for any sort of content, swing tips, anything like that, hey, it's a golf show right here, right? We'll talk about it. So let's start off with the golf course and the weather. First off, welcome in the chat, everybody. Hopefully you're doing well here. Let's see what's going on. So we got Jeff who's going, what's going on, Luke? Well, what's going on, Jeff? Welcome on in. What's going on, WMG? And Fantasy After Dark says, which course is the easiest? So technically, it'd be the Plantation course, but it's not because of the scoring average. They're actually relatively similar. We'll talk about that here in a second, Fantasy, but Plantation, it's not so much the scoring average as much as it is the eagle opportunities. You have more par fives around the par 72 Plantation. You also have 3 potentially drivable par fours. So that just, it adds a lot more upside in terms of fantasy scoring, because obviously 1 eagle is worth over 2 birdies. So yeah, that's something to keep in mind. We'll talk about that though. Jeff says, any wave or course stack? So no, there's actually no waves this week. So that's something we'll touch on. We're going to go through the weather and whatnot. It's going to be a little bit nasty tomorrow morning, but all the tee times are within 2 hours. So because of the 2 course setup, the first tee time is at 9 a.m. Eastern. The last tee time is at 11 a.m. Eastern. So only a 2-hour window right there. So not much that we could work with, but we'll talk through it. For prize picks or for Showdown, there's going to be a slight advantage. But if you're talking about for a 4-round contest, it's going to be minimal to no. So yeah, we'll talk about it. And you said, do you do underdog rivals? I'm actually going to start doing underdog videos for prize picks. Well, I shouldn't say for prize picks, for props, right? Let me go ahead and clarify that there. They started adding birdie or better props. They added strokes props over there on underdog. And of course, the rivals, which you're familiar with. Yeah, they have a lot of options now. So yeah, definitely something that I'll be investigating. Potentially even doing content for. But let's talk through this golf course. So this is for the Seaside. There are 2 courses for this week. There's the Seaside and then the Plantation. The Seaside is a par 70. It plays to rate around 69 strokes. So just a little bit under 1 under par. The Plantation plays closer to like 1.2, 1.1 shots under. So you're not talking about a huge discrepancy. So that's why when, Fantasy asked before about the Showdown, which golf course might play a little bit easier, it's kind of hard to say. The real advantage to taking Plantation players, there's a minimal stroke advantage, right? 0.1, 0.2 shots. But it's the eagle advantage that you get over there. It's extremely scoreable. Typically, the winners of the RSM take Plantation to something like 8 or 9 under par in their single round. So in my course breakdown video, I mentioned that it's probably the most important round that you play, even more important than Sunday, in my opinion, because, you look at some of the guys that finished in 2nd and 3rd place at the RSM over the last few years, they usually shot like 4 or 5 under par, which, is way better than average at the Plantation course. But the guys that are actually winning were shooting like 8, 9 under par, right? 3, 4 shots better. So it's a pivotal round, but all of the stats here are going to be for the Seaside, which is what you're going to see more, right? So if we're trying to pick players this week, we're not going to model them after the Plantation course. Though it brings a lot of volatility into play, you really have to take advantage of a low round around Plantation when we're trying to find our top 10 plays, our DFS plays of the week, or even picks to win. We need to really be considering the Seaside course, because that's where a majority of our plays going to come from. It's a short course, par 70, really easy to hit fairways and greens, which makes this a putting contest. You wouldn't really get that from Taylor Gooch. Gooch shot 22 under par. He's not one of the better putters that we had on the PGA Tour, but he was more of a ball striking specialist. So he kind of did it his own way. You can see what were his putting stats: 1.6 shots per round. That's not outrageous, right? It was one of the better numbers in the field, but you look at this, Adam Long gained 2.4 shots per round. McCarthy gained 1.8. So it's not like he led the field there, right? So he, was a little bit more balanced about it. But let's look at the rest of this top 10, right? Hughes, putting specialist. Cameron Smith, the best putter on tour. We're going to skip Munoz. Munoz is a little bit volatile, right? He gained strokes with the flat stick, but he doesn't always do so. Tom Hoagie, a little bit of an outlier, right? We'll talk about Hoagie later. absolutely love Tom Hoagie this week, but he didn't get it done with the putter. But most of these other guys, right, like a Webb Simpson, Taylor Moore, I guess there's a good mix here, right? At least in the top 10. I mean, you have putting specialists like a Denny McCarthy, then one of the worst putters on PGA Tour like a Luke List. So we can't really say that one sort of player can win here, right? Because, I mean, it's a putting contest, but Luke List finished in the top 10, right? It's a putting contest, but Tom Hoagie still finished in the top 5. It's a putting contest, but a volatile putter like Munoz still finished in the top 3. So you can see there's a little bit of a, I would say, there's a trend going on there, right? You have all these putting specialists up there. I mean, Rose, but then you have a bomber like Keith Mitchell. So, if we were going to try and say that there's only one way to get it done around the RSM, you'd be lying to yourself. You would be, right? If you're like, I'm only going to take plotters, well, then you're cornering yourself into a corner where you're not going to get to, a Tyler McCumber is relatively long off the tee. You're not going to get to a Munoz if you're looking for a plotter sort of player. I think you got to open it up a little bit when it comes to the course fit this week. Maybe don't think so narrow-minded, open yourself up to playing, let's say, like a Keith Mitchell, who, sure, he's a hometown guy. He's from Sea Island. I understand that he has a lot of experience around this golf course, but he was relatively low owned last year because he, quote unquote, didn't fit the golf course, right? And I was a victim of that. Like I do that all the time, right? I tell you guys, I'm fading this player because I don't think he's a very good fit this week. Well, sometimes we got to throw that out the window, particularly in a weak field event, because sometimes Keith Mitchell is just one of the best players in that field. So we're going to talk about course fit. There's going to be a few guys I point out that I really like because of their course fit, but particularly when we get into the mid-tier in 7K range, I'm more looking for just the best players in the field. And if they're going to be low owned, that just makes them an even more attractive play to me. So that's the golf course. It's kind of me throwing up my hands and saying, we don't know what kind of skill set is going to succeed. But for the guys that have had sustained success around this course, they have tended to be solid putters, right? Like a Kevin Kisner. This is like the house that Kevin Kisner built. Webb Simpson has had a lot of success around this track. Webb Simpson has also had a lot of success at a Sedgefield, also at a Harbor Town, short par 70s. So there's a lot of trends that we can draw from, but you just don't want to corner yourself there, right? Don't only play plotters this week, right? That I think you'd be going a little bit overboard. In terms of the weather, here, one second. I'm getting a little pasty here. I have the St. Simons Island weather tower up, and that's going to be your closest tower. It's a relatively small island. They still fit like 5 or 6 golf courses out there, though. So they make use of their space very well. But this is what I was talking about from the weather. So we know about the tee times. If you're just joining us, there are no tee time waves for this week. They're all teeing off between 9 and 11 a.m. because they have both golf courses. But if you're looking at prize picks or you're playing on Showdown, you want to try and take the guys teeing off at like 10:30 or like 10:40, 10:50 p.m. a.m. Eastern time. It'd be weird if they're teeing off at 10:50 p.m. You might be able to escape some of it, right? Because if you're teeing off at 9, you're going to have this whole hour and a half, maybe even a 2-hour window where the gusts are upwards of 20 miles an hour. Whereas if you're teeing off in the latter half of the 10 o'clock hour, you might only have 17, 16 mile an hour wind gusts. And then throughout the day, it's going to get even more lenient, even calmer as the day moves on. Those players might see like a 0.1, 0.2 shot advantage. I would say at least like a 0.2 shot advantage, but it might be half a stroke. It might be something like 0.6 strokes, where if you're playing a 150 max, you're taking a large enough player pool, you're really going to reap those benefits. And last week was a perfect example, right? We talked about this last week. And now this is more for the Showdown side. Those advantages add up. I mean, for the first day last week, we actually saw the PM wave. And again, we played the PM AM stack, right? We went with the guys like a Tony Finau that were playing in the PM wave on Thursday. Those guys had an advantage on Thursday, which we didn't expect, right? We didn't think that was going to happen with the weather. But then the next day, they saw over a 2-shot advantage, right? So in general, ended up being a 2.5-shot advantage to the PM stack last week. That really adds up, right? But even if you're playing Showdown, a 0.5, 0.6 shot advantage is something to take advantage of. Something else I think might kind of screw the guys in the morning is you saw it at the Houston Open. A lot of the dew was still out there. It's relatively humid in this part of the country. Of course, St. Simons Island going to be extremely humid. If there's any fog out there, if you wake up, you're watching PGA Tour Live and you see fog on the golf course, and you have guys teeing off early, just buckle up, because they're going to be in a heap of trouble. Anytime you have a Bermuda grass rough and it's got dew in it, it's extremely difficult to get solid contact. I mean, you're going to see scores a little bit higher than you'd expect tomorrow morning, I would imagine. And then the wind factor only adds to that. So again, that's more for the showdown side. I guess if you're going to try and find any advantage you can for 4-round contests, you could try and take guys that are teeing off later, right? Like you could, for your top end players, right? Like Jason Day tees off later. I know that for a fact. Tom Hoagie tees off in the later half. Seamus Power does, for example. I mean, you could limit your pool. I mean, at least up top, right? I wouldn't do it for the whole board, right? It's like going to be like a half a stroke advantage at the very most. You could break tiebreakers with it. Let's say that, right? I don't think you should be stacking the wave, right? I don't think stacking the guys that are, and it's not even a wave, right? Like this, like how crazy are we going to get about this weather shit, right? Like we take the advantages when we can, but when they're not there, right, we can't force it. So if you're trying to decide between two players, they're evenly matched across the board. One's AM, one's in the latter half of the wave here. Take the guy that's the latter half of the wave, right? Moving on. On Friday, it's even across the board. They're teeing off at 9 a.m., towards 11 a.m. It's a very similar story. So the guys that are teeing off later on Thursday are going to be teeing off earlier on Friday. And on Friday, it looks a little bit warmer. So you can see it gets up to like 54, 55 degrees there on Friday. The winds are lower. So if I want anybody going off early, it's going to be on Friday, right? Where the conditions look a little bit more lenient. It's sunny the whole day. You can see here on Thursday, it's cloudy. They have the cloud cover there. That fog, that dew isn't really going to evaporate as much, right? When they have a bunch of clouds out there. Whereas on Friday, when it's sunny the entire day, it should evaporate a little bit more quickly, right? So, I'm kind of talking myself into the stack here, right? We already had like a half a stroke there the first day. Maybe it's another 0.1, 0.2 shots there for the next day. Yeah, it's definitely something to break ties with. But outside of that, I don't think we have to go crazy with it. Let's head over to the player pool, the more pertinent side of this live stream, and start talking about strategy, some of the chalky plays, and how we're going to really play this slate. But before we do so, let's catch up on chat and see what we've got down there. Mark Green says, what do you think of Matt Neesmith's chances? So I liked him to begin the week, and then somebody who I don't like so much talked him up. And the reasoning behind it just didn't even make sense to me. So I like him for different reasons than a lot of other people in the industry do. I like Matthew Neesmith here because of his accuracy off the tee. Everyone that I've seen talking him up is talking about his recent form, but I guess they just didn't watch last week, right? Where he finished in 53, hardly made the cut, which he had the luck sack there on a Friday. He played horrible there on Thursday. I'm pretty sure you guys saw that, and then had the round of his life on Friday to make the cut, and then didn't do shit with it over the weekend. And I completely called that. I told you guys that, this time off, this 3-4 week stretch that he took off was going to end up nabbing him, and it did, right? So I wanted to play Matthew Neesmith because I thought he was going to be low owned, right? People were going to get scared off in that performance. I think he's a good course fit, accurate off the tee and whatnot, but he's chalky. He's like 16% owned in the last run that I ran. And people were playing him because of his recent form, right? They're looking at the shots gained metrics for like the last 50 rounds, or some of them even a little bit more shorter term. And they're like, oh, wow, Matthew Neesmith, gaining a bunch off the tee on approach. Look at his stats from last week, right? Like sometimes people fall apart. And a lot of times a player gets on a heater and will sustain it for 3 or 4 events and then go back to the realm of the unknown. So if you're going to play Neesmith, I'm not going to be doing so this week. I think he's way too high owned for my liking. You have to think that he's that guy. That a long-term perspective, you think Matthew Neesmith is a legitimate player, and just from the sample size, of the last 4 or 5 years playing fantasy golf, he hasn't been that dude, right? So unless he's changed, unless he's just a better player now, which I don't have any information on that being the case. From the eye test, it's not like he looks like he has a new swing. It doesn't look a whole lot more athletic, and not like he's hitting the ball a lot longer. I have a hard time thinking that's going to continue. So I wanted to play him. Trust me, because he loves the golf course, right? You take a look at his course history; it speaks for itself. It's also why he's a little bit more pricey this week. He has a top 29 finish his last 3 starts. But I worry about the time off, and then I worry about last week at Houston, which isn't the same golf course, right? It's a much shorter course this week, which plays into his skill set. But I worry about it. I wish he would have been 10% owned, like the guys around him, right? Like a Denny McCarthy or somebody like a Matt Kuchar. If he was going to be like averagely owned for the range, fine. I'm okay with Matthew Neesmith. but I have to play 30 to 35% to get leverage. So personally, I'm just not getting there. I guess I understand the play, but there's guys I just like a little bit more, right? So that's the fact of the matter for me. Long answer there, but hey, I wanted to give you everything you needed to know. Fantasy says Keith Mitchell always looks like he doesn't give a shit. And he said, yeah, it's Neesmith's favorite course. Yeah, there's a lot of narrative behind it too. Hilton Head is a very correlated course. He played well there last year, Matthew Neesmith. I remember that. It makes sense. Like from the course fit perspective, I get it. And he's played well here too. I just can't get there. I don't think he's that guy. But yeah, you said Keith Mitchell looks like he doesn't give a shit out there. I have to agree with you. But sometimes that's a good thing, right? Dustin Johnson, multiple-time major winner, world number one at multiple points of his career, also is like the king of that. So it's hey, if it works for him, keep going with it. And from what I've heard, like there's stories, like you'll hear little tidbits about players in the media and whatnot. Keith Mitchell seems like a pretty cool dude, like somebody you enjoyed sitting down having a beer with. Speaking of that, I was supposed to crack this open at the beginning of the stream. So we're going to take a little break here. If you have any questions, feel free to go ahead and put it in chat. I have this special lucky whiskey that I'm actually going to crack open here. It's called Old Extra 7. It's a single barrel, so it's their single barrel version of what they have. And I figure I'm going to save it for the stream because it's Old Extra 7s, right? It's lucky number 7. Hopefully one of us here is going to take down a GPP this weekend, and we'll have to see. See, Fantasy likes Keith Mitchell. Yeah, I'm okay with the play. He's not highly owned, right? So unlike a Matthew Neesmith, he's not mega chalky. So if you're going to get to somebody like that, I understand it. I guess spoiler alert, I'll just say that I'm not getting to Keith Mitchell, but also a Sea Island boy, has that familiarity. He's putted well at this golf course in the past. So that familiarity has translated to success at Sea Island. I think there's crazier things you could do. That's for sure. Randy says, good morning from Thailand. What's going on? You said your thoughts on Seamus Power. And you're on Will Gordon. Yeah, same here. I love Will Gordon. I think he's just got so much upside going forward. But good old Seamus Power. So I'm not going to be on him. He's going to be that one player that I just can't get to this week that makes my stomach curl a little bit, right? Because the form's there. In terms of like your best player in the field, it is undoubtedly, at least as of right now, I think Montgomery is probably going to pass him at some point this year, but he's your best player in the field as of right now, right? Seamus Power. He's $10,500. And he's one of the lower owned options up top. In fact, Harmon and Montgomery are like 3-4% higher owned than a Seamus Power. So I don't know. It's something I'm starting to question, but Brian Harmon, Tom Hoagie, they've got the course history I'm looking for. It's not like, Power has bad course history. I mean, outside of, I shouldn't say that. He's got very inconsistent course history, right? Missed the cut the first 3 trips here. I believe back in 2017, he might have missed the cut too. But we have to remember, he's a different player now. He's a completely different style golfer now, completely different pedigree golfer than he was back in the day. I mean, he was hardly on the Korn Ferry Tour. He was hardly even getting PGA Tour starts back from 2018 to 2020. Now he's a PGA Tour winner, multiple winner on the PGA Tour. Yeah, man. Like I'm giving you all of these reasons to play him just to give you an idea of how uncomfortable it is for me. I think that he's a decent play here. I just like Brian Harmon and Hoagie more. Unfortunately, the masses also really like Brian Harmon. So we got to touch on it. He's 28% owned. There's a chance I just don't play Brian Harmon. And there's a chance I probably just end up fading Seamus Power too. There's not a lot of options in the 10K range. People are going to spend all of their salary. So that's why all of these guys are just mega chalk, right? I mean, Seamus is like 24%. You have 23% plus on all 3 of these guys. Even a Jason Day, Keith Mitchell are like 20% plus. And really, you just kind of got to pick your favorite out of the bunch. So I'm not sure if I'm going to end up fading Brian Harmon, but I'm not going to play him in 60% of lineups, right? So in terms of like actual, like I should say, traditional leverage, right? A lot of people out there will say that you have to get 2x on a player. I'm not one of those people. If you've seen my lineup breakdown videos, my slate breakdowns that we've done a few weeks of late, I'm going to try and make that more consistent going forward. During football season, it's a little bit tough, right? I sometimes need a little bit of time to decompress, like Sunday night, Monday morning. I need like 12 hours of no sports to kind of reset my system. But hey, we're going to start doing it when football's gone. That's for damn sure. But on there, I've talked about it multiple times already that there's this misconception out there. I'm going to call it a misconception because this is my personal take on it. This isn't like fact, right? This is just a personal opinion here. The 2x rule is bullshit to me because when you play NBA DFS, that becomes very apparent. When you're an NBA DFS player, you can take even stands on the field. You can actually even take stands under the field on players and get away with it. I can just tell you it's by far my most profitable sport. It's a sport I'm not really willing to give away too much of the process, but any DFS pro that's playing NBA knows that you don't have to do this whole 2x roll, right? You're playing somebody, it's all in relation to how much you like that player. So I don't think you have to fade all these guys up top, right? And because there's only, what is there? At least 10K options, there's only 2 of them, right? But in this 9K range, there's just less players than we're used to seeing. Like 1.5x, 1.7x the field, right? Like maybe you don't have to be as aggressive because I don't know, 60% Brian Harman just doesn't sit right. I mean, even 55% Brian Harman doesn't sit right. So if you're playing him in like, let's say 40, 45% of lineups, I think it's one of the few weeks that I'm going to do that, right? Typically, I play at least 2x the field. I want to get that out there. But I don't think it's like a rule that you have to live by. Like every player has to be at least 2x the field. Like, no, they don't. Like that's silly. There's no reason for it, right? Like why 2x? Why is it 2x opposed to 1.95x, right? As opposed to 2.05x, whatever the number may be. Like we're just guessing, right? With 2x, right? Like people just like, oh, I want double the field because that sounds nice. Like just, you don't have to do that. It cracks me up when I hear that, especially people that like claim they're professionals that like claim that you like have to do 2x. It's like, what? Like who told you that? Like why do you think that's the magic number? 2x the field. Like I'm done ranting about that. I think it's ridiculous. Matt says, let's get that takedown for sure. I know last week you had a pretty solid week yourself. Fantasy says, with all the choices for Showdown, what's the best tournament? Typically, I play single entries or just smaller field contests for Showdown. It's been really, really bad this swing season. I mean, the contest selection isn't there, right? I mean, our best prize pool is like 10K to first, and it's so top heavy, it's insane. It's like 10,000 of a $30,000 pool, right? So a third of it's going to first place. Yeah, man. So for Showdown, I've been taking it a little bit more lightly in the swing season. A lot of that is just based on contest selection, but I'm going with a lot of 20 maxes. So they have that 120 max they do. It's like $1 per entry. That's a pretty good contest to enter, believe it or not. If you want a little bit higher volume, like what I'm doing is I play a lot of single entries. So I'll enter all the $5 single entries. Usually they'll put up a couple $5 single entries, 12, obviously $33 ones that they're putting up there. That's where I get a majority of my exposure. It's tough this time of year. DraftKings puts up a little bit less volume, unfortunately. So I'm not 100% sure. Excuse me, guys. That whiskey, when you stop sipping it, it's got bite to it. You guys have seen me sip whiskey on this before. That's making my eyes water. Dang it. What's the percentage on it? I got to double check this. That's why it's 59% alcohol. We're going to do the responsible thing here, boys. And you don't see me do this very often. Put a little bit of water in it. I like hardly ever do that. It's like sacrilegious for whiskey drinkers, but that was tough. I was not expecting that much kick there. So I'm assuming you're talking about Seamus Power there. Yeah, his fairways, I actually like quite a bit. I didn't end up taking it myself. His greens, he's at like 14 greens. So I feel like that's a little bit aggressive on him. Birdies are better, though. I had him at 4.5 birdies or better. I love that line. Jack Fisher says, what do you think of Harris English for an each way bet? He was doing okay last week, but had a bad last 4 holes. So yeah, so I don't have him on here as like a play, but I'll tell you, I like Harris English this week. He has familiarity with the course. He's played it plenty of times outside of tournament play. He's been on record as saying so. Loves the golf course, also on record as saying that. And I think he's a much, much, much better player than his peers. In fact, when Harris English gets back to what he's usually doing out here, can get over the injury. He's still, by the way, guys, you have to remember this. He was out for like 9 months with injury, right? He's only like a month and a half, 2 months removed from that. Golf takes a long time to get back into the swing of things. So he's only going to continue to get better over the next few months. Yeah, man. Like I'm going to be a buyer on him because he could be a 9K golfer. He could be a 10K golfer in this field. He's a better player than Brian Harman. Like here's the point I want to make here. Harris English, multiple time winner over the last few years. No one else can say that here. Not one player in the field, right? I mean, let's go through this. No one else in the field can say that. I mean, Seamus Power, right? He's won a few times over the last few years. And then Harris English is the next guy in the field that can say that. So if you're looking for just somebody that has winning upside, has shown that pedigree in the past, he's your guy. And like you said, he started to look a lot better. And believe it or not, rounds 1 and 2, he was top 5 in the field in both ball striking stats and just couldn't make a putt for his life. So he kept himself there, got through the cut last week without his putter, which is like what he's known for. So yeah, man, I really, really like Harris English this week. Like so much so, Jack, that I didn't want to talk him up in a video because I don't want his ownership to go up. But hey, if you're going to ask about him, I'm going to give you my real take on him. And honestly, he's one of my favorite plays. He said, yeah, it's moonshine. Honestly, like I'm hoping let's try it with the water now. I'm hoping the water made this a little bit more palatable because that was an experience. Much better. Now it tastes like normal. That was insane. Noted for the future. Let's go back up to the top. So just to finish my thoughts on this top end range, like I'm probably just going to take my guys that I'm on right now, go with them, but I'm not going to play 55, 60% of them. Like Tom Hoge, he's 24% owned. I'm probably playing him in 35 to 40% of lineups. And Denny McCarthy here, now he's only 11% owned, right? I'll play 25% of him, right? I'm okay getting a little bit more leverage on a Denny there. It's just when I'm playing 150 lineups, I don't know. Maybe I'm full. Maybe I'm a fool. Maybe I'm just a little bit of a wimp out there. I was going to say a bad word there. Maybe I'm a little bit of a wimp, right? Not going to go out there and play 60% of somebody in my lineups. But it's Brian Harmon. It's Tom Hoge. Like I know who these guys are, right? It's not playing John Rahm in all your lineups. It's not locking Justin Thomas or Jordan Spieth, right? Like I'll do from time to time. It's a Tom Hoge or a Brian Harmon. So like, get out of here. I'm not playing them at 60, 70% of my lineups. That's ridiculous, right? And I don't think that means that you have to full fade them either. That's just my personal take on it. Still like McCarthy, still like Kuchar. Both are relatively low owned, which I love to see there. Sahith Theegala, though, is somebody I want to feature. Obviously, I already talked up Kuchar and McCarthy, so I don't have to do it again. Make sure to check out the Core Picks video if you haven't already seen my takes on those two players. But Sahith Theegala, if he can keep the ball on planet Earth this week, could win this golf tournament. Because, I was going through my core picks this week. And if you guys remember, if you watched the video, I mixed up Theegala's and Kuchar's shots gained metrics because look at them here. It's eerily similar, right? Off the tee, both slight losers, right around a third of a stroke gained per round on approach, right around a third of a stroke gained per round around the green. And then the putter, it's just ridiculous how close these two guys are. And if we love Kuchar's course fit, and Kuchar's been pretty solid around this track, shouldn't we like Theegala, right? And then we, get to the logic standpoint. We start to think about it. We go, well, Sahith can't keep it on planet Earth. It's only a 6,800 100-yard golf course. He doesn't have to hit driver around here, right? And kind of like a Will Gordon, I mentioned this in my value picks videos a few hours ago. Also, a few other value picks I took, maybe not the most accurate drivers, but guys like Keith Mitchell have had success here. And you want to know why? Because he doesn't have to hit driver. He can hit a 3-wood. He can hit a driving iron off a lot of other tees where people are hitting a driver and lean on what he's good at, which from fairway in is one of the best games on all of the PGA Tour. And I know I talked earlier about Webb Simpson kind of being like your prototype for this course. He's had a lot of success here. Harbor Town, he's had success at Sedgefield, another short par 7. Well, actually, I think it's like a par 71. Either way, right? It's a short golf course. That's Bermuda grass. That's the real important thing to focus on there. Maybe Sahith is that same sort of player because he's got the same sort of profile where from fairway in, he's one of the best players on tour. So it's a low-owned play I like getting to. Now, if Sahith was like 15% owned, if he was getting a significant amount of ownership, I wouldn't be on him, right? I'd probably be fading him if he was chalk here. But he's right in line with somebody like a Kuchar in terms of ownership. And, if you're just putting them in 25% of your lineups and getting leverage, now that's something that I'm willing to do. So those are the sort of guys I see myself getting to. Still like Mackenzie Hughes, I don't love the ownership. Now, I figured that he might go down in ownership, even after last week with like the 16th place finish, just because of how inaccurate off the tee he was. But good old Mackie Hughes, chalk of this range. Just I hate to see it. He actually may end up being a fade. So if there's one guy on this list that it may not end up playing, it's probably Mackenzie Hughes. just because of that 17.2% number right there. It's ugly. I want nothing to do with that, to be quite frank with you. Outside of that, I mean, Webb Simpson, Kevin Kisner, they're your course fit plays. If you're somebody that's willing to take a shot on course fit over recent form, then I think they make a lot of sense, but that's all up to your philosophy, right? If you're somebody that's a recent form aficionado, only going to look at that, then maybe don't touch on those two players. Patrick Rogers and Taylor Pendrith are quote unquote bad course fits, but we said the same thing about Sahith and I'm playing him. And we said the same thing about Keith Mitchell, and he's played pretty well here. So I don't think you can just X them off the board, right? I don't think you can just completely ignore a Rogers and a Pendrith there, particularly because both are relatively low owned. Now, am I playing either player? No, right? I'm still looking at course fit, right? Like I have to be honest about that, but it's still more than reasonable for these guys to have success. You're paying a little bit of a steep price on a Rogers. You're paying a little bit of an ownership premium on a Taylor Pendrith, but I don't think they're crazy plays. Just wanted to put that out there. Still like Brendan Todd, he's also only 9% owned, just under 10% there. I figured he would have been closer to like 15%, so I love to see that. In the 7K range, I mean, I went through Will Gordon earlier. We talked about some of the other value picks I'm getting to, but Chris Kirk, also low owned. Now, I thought he was going to be closer to like 10, 15%, but he's right in line with somebody like a Will Gordon. So I'll definitely be getting there. He's accurate off the tee, solid on approach, not the best Bermuda putter, but still a plus compared to all of his other surfaces. He's a loser, I believe, on every surface except for the bent POA mix. And then obviously a gainer over there on Bermuda. Let's see what else we got. Still playing Scott Stallings. Love him. Love Davis Thompson. And by the way, Will Gordon, he's from Sea Island. A lot of people don't know that. Davis Thompson from Sea Island. Ben Griffin from Sea Island. It's not a surprise that I'm getting to these three players. But I talked about it on my value picks video. I'm going to reiterate it right now just for anybody that didn't catch it. These are three of your premier rookies. Will Gordon gaining a ton with both ball striking categories. Davis Thompson gaining over a third of a stroke in both ball striking categories. In fact, over 3/4 of a stroke off the tee. And then, of course, where is good old Ben Griffin gaining 3/4 of a stroke per round on approach? No other rookies can really sniff that. And that's not the last 12 rounds. That's not the last 16. That was the last 50 measured rounds, which includes a lot of rounds from before these guys were even on tour. A lot of missed cuts, a lot of ugly rounds for guys like a Davis Thompson are included in that sample size. A lot of really ugly rounds for guys like a Will Gordon too, who after, getting on tour with the Travelers, he finished in second place, lost in a playoff. That's how he got his special temporary exemption. After that happened, he missed a crap ton of cuts. Some of those rounds are still included here because he hasn't played 50 rounds this season, yet they're still gaining a bunch of strokes on approach. I mean, that's just, if the smaller sample size that we give them, the better and better they look too, which is the scary part. So I'm extremely bullish on their futures. And then you tell me that they're sleeping in their own bed this weekend and they're solid course fits, then yeah, of course I'm going to be on them. So I wanted to point those three guys out because they're some of my favorite plays on the slate, let alone just in the value tier range. Moving on a little bit further, just in general, this 7K range is full of a lot of decent options. I mean, I would try and focus on the higher upside players, guys that can shoot someone like 7, 8 under par. I mean, Steven Yeager, right? We know he can go low. He shot a 59 before. Let's see. I'm probably avoiding a Cameron Champ. I'm probably avoiding a Chris Gotterup. Now, the difference between a Champ and a Gotterup, and then somebody like a Keith Mitchell up here that's a bomber, a Sahith Theegala, right, a little bit inaccurate off the tee, is the rest of the game, right? Outside of off the tee play for some of these guys down here, they don't really have much to draw off of, right? Even a Molinax down here, Luke List is a much better approach player. So you saw him finish in the top 10 last year. That's mostly due to his iron play, right? He's a solid wedge player. He's not just a bomber off the tee. But for some of these guys that are a little bit more one-dimensional, especially a Cameron Champ, especially a Chris Gotterup, extremely one-dimensional players, I don't know if they have that same kind of upside, right? As a Keith Mitchell, those other players that we mentioned that are just better, right? A little bit more well-rounded. So bombers, I don't think you have to cross off, but they better have other stuff going for them, right? They can't just be a bomber. Unfortunately, Cameron Champ tends to be. He's he can gain 10 strokes off the tee from time to time. Just, that putter, it can be extremely volatile, but that approach play is, it's a tough scene for Cameron Champ from time to time. Still like Chesson Hadley. Great course fit. But I want to talk about good old Michael Thompson here. He's you probably guessed it, another Sea Island boy, but he's a solid course fit to begin with. We know he's accurate off the tee. The 3M Open is a course with a bunch of water off the tee. He's had success there. He's had success at the Honda Classic, right? PGA National, another course I comp pretty similar to what we're going to see here this week, especially off the tee. He's a local. He loves Bermuda grass. And I know the form hasn't been amazing, but it also hasn't been dog shit. Like, it hasn't been like losing a stroke per round in each category. So if we go here, Michael Thompson, he's like even across the board in most categories, a slight loser off the tee, a slight gainer with his putter. And off the tee, it's all his distance, right? He's one of the shorter players that we have on the PGA Tour. But boy, oh boy, can he hit fairways. And around a 6,800-yard golf course, that's kind of what you have to do, right? It's just hit a bunch of fairways, get the job done. So, kind of like we're not crossing off players that are super long off the tee. We're not going to cross people off. I mean, we're surely not going to do that for guys that are short off the tee. So if everything else has been there, he's only 1.5% owned. He's a local. I mean, yeah, I'm going to play him in like 5-7% of my lineups. So I just want to make that clear, right? He's not going to be like 20% owned for me or anything like that. I'm not playing Michael Thompson in my big single entry lineup, but in a 150 max, I think he brings a ton of utility and a bunch of upside there too. In the 6K range, it really drops off fast, but there are some names you can get to. I mean, Tyler Duncan, you got to like his ball striking. Harry Hall, he played a practice round with Justin Rose the other day. Justin Rose, somebody who has a lot of success, a lot of experience around this track. So hopefully he picked up a thing or two from him and can go out there and have a solid week. He's a really good putter, so you got to like that in terms of course fit. You're just looking for upside, right? So guys that make a bunch of birdies. I mean, Sabatini, pretty decent course fit. Bhatia, right? If you're one of those Bhatia fans, I am. He's an absolute stud. He's a great kid. You got to love playing him, but I'm not going to play him in DFS, right? I'm going to root him on, but I'm not going to play him in DFS. But hey, if you want to take a shot on him, I understand it. Let's go through these $6,300 options though, because I figured we'd get a question about Burmeister at some point, but I guess we haven't. So let's talk about him. Good old Dean. I loved Dean the other week. He was like $7,700 and he was 15% owned and nobody played him. Now he's $6,300, so way cheaper. He's half as owned as what we had last week. And I don't want to play him, right? So I played him when he was chalkier and more expensive. And now I don't want to play him when he's cheap and less owned. So what's the give with that? Like, what's going on, right? It's course fit. Dean Burmeister is a bomber. Like, this guy just hits piss missiles out there. I mean, he's just a load of a human being, a lot of fun to watch, but he can't hit a fairway for his life. And at the Houston Open, that's exactly what killed him. Now, it wasn't like he was hitting it into water hazards. He was just, putting himself out of position. The Houston Open played a little bit easier than what we were used to seeing. And as a result, he wasn't shooting like 3-4 under par, right? He ejected last week. I don't like him here because he's 10% owned, and in the 6K range, that's like being 40% owned up top. I mean, you don't see guys that are 10% owned in the 6K range. And when you compare him to a Brian Stewart, and I hate Brian Stewart. If you've been here for a long time, this is my least favorite player on the entire PGA Tour, Brian Stewart. And I'm willing to play him over a Dean Burmeister because he's got the course fit. He's accurate off the tee. He's the same putter as somebody like a Burmeister on Bermuda grass. And the recent form actually favors a Brian Stewart, which I don't think anybody would expect, right? Because Brian Stewart Dean Burmeister, I should say, was like number 5 in the field in recent form last week. And sure, yeah, he ejected last week, right? That's why the stats have now come back down to earth. But now Brian Stewart's a better course fit, and he's going to be 10 times less owned. Obviously that's a deficiency, right? Something I'm going to try and take advantage of. So yeah, good old Dean Burmeister. He screwed me last week, and I'm not going back. And that's not because of a grudge. That's just because he's way, way, way chalkier than I would like here in the 6K range. Outside of that, I'm also playing Martin Trainer. I put him down as a sleeper pick because I don't play Martin Trainer very often. But if you're going to play him, it's at a short golf course that has Bermuda grass. That's a putting fest, because he's one of the better putters that you have on the PGA Tour, and he's a decent wedge player too. So he's $6,000. He hasn't done shit for months. I mean, look at the recent form. He's losing almost a stroke per round. I don't know. I play him in 3 lineups. I get leverage, right? He's 0.1% owned. I don't know. I'm going to play him in like 4 lineups this week, right? And if he ends up finishing in the top 10 or even like the top 20, top 25 at $6,000, that might be enough to pay off. So I probably shouldn't even say this. I might play him in like 7 to 10% of lineups because I don't know, a top 25 finish. I don't know if it's asking that much from Martin Trainer at a golf course that fits his game. How has he played here over the years? That would just be the icing on the cake. And I don't even know how he's played here. Let's see. Yeah, he's missed the cut his last 3 times. Not surprising. But do I think he can make the cut this time around? Yeah, because we've seen him have success. Last year at PGA West, which was for the American Express, the 3 courses in rotation there are also relatively short, positional, more of like a putting contest than anything. I mean, you have guys winning there at like 25 to 30 under par. That's the kind of course that he shined at last year. So I don't know. Maybe I'm crazy for wanting to play Martin Trainer, but I don't know. My spidey senses are tingling about that. I got a feeling about Martin Trainer this week, so he's definitely going to be in my pool. Let's catch up on chat, see what's going on, and then we'll hop into Draftkings. Talk about lineup construction. Talk about what the chalk construction is going to look like. Some of the thought process when going through and hand building lineups, and also some of the cash builds, some of that sort of stuff. Let's see. Let's figure out where we're at here. Brian Gay for a top 10 finish. Oh, you asked a question about a guy I didn't want to talk about too much. Yeah, I like Brian Gay this week. He's in form, kind of similar to a Brian Stewart. He's like been hitting the ball well of late, and he's a good course fit. And on Bermuda grass, he's one of the best putters in the field. 25 to 1 odds seems some pretty solid value to me. The book that I have has him at way lower odds than that, so I'm not able to get that sort of value. But hey, yeah, if you can get 25 to 1, go for it. WMG says thoughts on Akshay. I love him as a human being. Hope that he plays well. Just I don't think it's the best golf course for him. Homebrew says Ben Griffin shot a 59 at Sea Island. Oh, that's good to know. Okay. I know that Steven Yeager, Grayson Sigg shot a 58. Steven Yeager, I believe, shot a 60 or 61 around the Plantation course. So, and by the way, at Plantation, it's a par 72, right? So that's 11 under par. That's impressive stuff. Anointed says, hi, Luke. What are your thoughts on the optimal player pool size and why? You only play a 20 max in the large 17K tournament. So if you're in a 20 max, you're going to have a much more condensed pool than what I'm reflecting on Patreon with a 150 max pool. In 20 lineups, I'm typically going to have like 20 players. I think it's right around that sort of metric there, where a lot of my shots, a lot more of my exposure is spread out down low. And I might have, 3 or 4 core players where I'm playing at least 2, sometimes 3 of them in every single lineup. So I don't want to call them locks, but guys that I'm going to own in like 60, 70% of my lineups up top. And then down low in the 6K range, even in just 20 lineups, I may take 5, 6 different players. So, obviously those are picks that you're going to be a little bit less confident in, and you have to get less exposure to them to get leverage. So I would say like 20 players. I think that's in the ballpark of where you need to be for a 20 max, but you could give or take 5 in either direction, right? If you're going to be aggressive, it could be 15. If you want to be a little bit more spread out, a little bit safer about your player pool, then you might want 25 players for all I know. So it's all up to you, all up to your risk tolerance. But 20 is a good number. You already talked about props. I have not actually. So you joined here just in time. We're going to be talking about that in about 10 minutes. So let's go over to DraftKings. Let me stop sharing my screen. We're going to talk through lineup construction, and then afterwards, we're going to get into the prize picks board. So yeah, you can see it's the next tab we're going to get to here. I do have a video up to Chase. So afterwards, make sure to check out the video if you haven't already. But for the DraftKings board, let's go through a few lineups. So in terms of like your that's a cash build. I was going to call it the chalk build, but your cash build is always going to be a little bit chalky. It's going to be balanced. It's going to be taking a lot of these 8K guys. I imagine, let's see, who's going to be mega chalky in cash? I mean, I don't think there's like an obvious cash build. We said this last week too. And honestly, I had a damn good week last week. So I'm hoping it's the same sort of thing here where there's no obvious players to get to, right? Ownership's relatively flat across the board. So I don't know. Brian Harmon, right? He's a cut maker. So I think he's my favorite cash player up top. In terms of a second man in, it's probably McCarthy, right? McCarthy's been extremely consistent. He's really taken his game to another level since the ball striking is improved. So we'll go ahead and take him there. Let's see what else we got. In the 8K range, We're at 7,600 bucks. So we're doing good on salary too here. Probably not taking a Kisner because of the form. Probably not even taking a Webb. They just seem a little bit risky with the recent form. Brendan Todd, perfect cash play for this golf tournament. So let's put him in there. Andrew Putnam is a no-brainer for cash contests. And I mean, like, I don't know. This is a pretty easy lap to make, actually. I thought it was going to be a little bit more difficult at first. I don't know. Put Grayson Sig in here. I mean, he loves the golf course. And round it off with your favorite option at 7,200 bucks. I mean, it lineup kind of makes itself. You take these short plotters that love this golf course, that have had success around this track. I mean, McCarthy's had success at the RSM. Brian Harmon, we know that. He's coming in, making 8 straight cuts as well. Just your favorite guys to make the cut, take them in your cash lineup. Doesn't have to be those exact 5 guys. But yeah, it's not one of those weeks where like there's 4 guys that you have to have in your cash lineup that are obvious picks, that are mega pieces of chalk, like a Tony Finau would have been on this sort of slate. But now that he withdrew, it makes the slate a little bit more interesting, in my opinion, as there's, like I said, not those free squares that a lot of the field are going to be playing. From the GPP's perspective, we can get a lot more involved here, a little bit more wacky about our lineup. I could see myself fading the 10K range, right? I started off with that at the beginning of our player poll, maybe just avoiding that range entirely. Maybe starting with, I don't know, Jason Day. He seems like a pretty good play to me. Let's put Denny McCarthy in there. So we have 2 9K options, yet still just over $7,800 remaining. Let's put a good old Sahith in there too. Just to show you how much you can buy by having this, balanced approach there. Let's put Kiz in there. I don't hate Kiz this week, for the record. And down here at $6,000, I'm going to show you the utility of getting to a Martin Trainer, right? You take a Martin Trainer, you can take literally all 8 and 9K golfers. That's the utility of playing a Martin Trainer. And heck, you don't even have to go the whole way down there. I mean, you could play Brian Stewart, right? We talked about Brian Stewart at 6,300 bucks. You still have $8,100 remaining. If you wanted to finish this lineup with a Davis Riley, a Wyndham Clark, or a Brendan Todd, then by all means, or even a Andrew Putnam. I love Putnam this week. I think he's a great course fit, coming in with the form I'm looking for. That's the utility of taking those cheap players. And at the RSM Classic, I mean, we've seen some wacky shit happen. I'm thinking of not Brian Stewart, Robert Streb, first-round leader. I believe that was 2 years ago at the RSM. Last year, we had a few wacky first-round leaders or guys up there in contention for it. You got to expect some of the unexpected at these golf courses. So I'm going to take shots even more likely at this event than I would for most. Like, it's just the whole field could win here. You've seen a lot of just wacky winners at this event over the years. And I mean, especially guys up there in the top 5 to 10. So yeah, definitely viable from that end. What we're going to do now is another build, but this time we will take a 10K golfer. So let's put Hoagie in there. I guess he's not even a 10K golfer. I guess we have to take Brian Harmon there. Let's put Harmon in. For our second man in, let's go with a Mackenzie Hughes. We still like him in there. Let's take Matt Kuchar. We're down to 7,400 bucks. So we're not going to take a super cheap option. We're going to be a little bit more reasonable here, taking like a Michael Thompson as our cheapest player. Towards the bottom, mid part of the 7K range, Ben Griffin is a player I love. And if we're in a GPP, we have like 30% on Harmon. We have like a 17% owned Hughes. The only low-owned guy we have so far is a Thompson. So maybe, I want to take a good play here. I want to take somebody that's going to be one of my top plays on the slate, but I leave $200 on the table. So even though I have 5 relatively chalky pieces and then only 1 low-end option, because I'm leaving $200 on the table, this lineup's going to have a much higher chance of being unique, not being duplicated, than it would have been if I even took, like, let's say took Davis Riley, right? Davis Riley is right around the same amount of ownership as an Andrew Putnam. Now this lineup has 20 times the chance of being duplicated, like literally 20 times the chance of being duplicated. Over 99.7% of lineups spend within $200 of the salary cap. So like 49.8 or above. So if you wanted to get really wacky about it, you'd leave an extra 100, right? You'd go down to like an Aaron Rye, leave $300 on the table. Then you have almost zero shot of being duplicated. So it's a powerful thing, just leaving $200 on the table, right? Going in there and taking an Andrew Putnam rather than a Davis Riley. And do we really think there's a massive difference between their projections? I mean, sure, Davis Riley, I think, is a better player long-term, but Putnam's like a perfect course fit here. So I don't think you're losing too much by leaving that salary on the table. That's the other way you could go about making a lineup unique. Let's see if there's any questions from the GPP side before we head into prize picks and see what's going on. WG says, what would you say your top two values are? So Will Gordon and Davis Thompson. Those would be by far my top two value picks. Ben Griffin would also be in that conversation. They have the familiarity, the recent form, and the course fit I'm looking for. They check all of the boxes that we're looking at. And sure, they might not end up coming through, but they just make too much sense as plays, particularly because they're only like 8% owned. They have to get to them. Like if they were 15% chalk, like I might not play them, right? But they're low owned. It's just a little ridiculous. Antonio says, "Yo, bro, I just joined. But what's your card for this card?" Yeah, I'll show you. I'll show you the prize pick stuff. So let's go into the prize pick stuff now. Assuming, or maybe you're talking about my betting card instead of my prize picks card. My betting card. So let's go through it. So I only have a couple bets in right now, and they were before Tony Finau withdrew. So keep that in mind. I bet Will Gordon as soon as the number dropped. Ooh, at whiskey, by the way, if you're just joining, I have this lucky number 7 whiskey. It's called Old Extra 7. This shit has a bite to it. It's like 59%. Did not expect it. Did not read the label before we ended up pouring it in our cup. So if you see me flinching at the cup, it's not because it's hot or something like that. It's because it's just got too much alcohol in it. And he said, "Yeah, bro, you're bad now. You're good." I had a little brain fart there, but man, yeah, my card, I have Will Gordon on it. I hit it as soon as the number came out. I bet Tom Hoagie. I also got a better number on him because of the Tony Finau withdrawal. And who else did I bet? It was a really long shot. I don't even remember. All right, if I can think of the name, if it comes back to me, I'll let you know. I'm looking through my player pool right now, trying to figure out who it was. Gosh, how can I remember? It was Sepp Straka. It was Sepp Straka. I got a really, really good number on Sepp Straka this week. And I don't know, somebody I know talked shit about Sepp Straka. And like, I don't know, it like just draws me towards players when people are talking shit about them because it's golf. We know like players can play bad one week and then look great the next week. And he's played well at these like really tough driving tests. Like, I don't know. Sepp Straka. Watch him win this week. If he does, it's just going to be the ultimate victory lap for me, especially because my buddy was very adamant about it. But over here on the prize pick side, the weather comes back into play, right? So I know we began the live stream talking about the weather, but for prize picks for showdown tomorrow, it's a huge advantage. The guys that are teeing off around 9 a.m., 9, 10 a.m., some of like the early tee times on prize picks, they're going to be hit with much worse weather than what we're going to see in the afternoon. So on here, guys that are teeing off, let's give you an example, like 9:20 a.m., like that's a tough scene. If anything, I'd probably fade him. Like Sepp Straka, even though he's like 9:20, but he's at 4 birdies, right? So he wouldn't be a fade. I'm trying to take the guys like a power. Tom Hoagie, for example, a Jason Day that are there at 10:30 a.m. that I'm a little bit more comfortable getting to their marks. So for birdies are better, I did like Seamus Power over. I put that in the video I put out there recently. So that's a prop I can tell you I took definitively. For strokes, the average last year was 69. So I think there's a little bit of a larger edge here for the birdie board than there is for the strokes board, especially considering the weather in the morning. It's going to be relatively cool too. You can see 50 degrees there in the morning, 52 degrees by the afternoon, which is going to impact how far the ball is flying. So I don't love the strokes board. Like I think if you're going to do anything here, pick your shots. Like there's a few guys teeing off later on that you can take, but if you're going to take just like random shots on the board, like I prefer them for birdies are better. Just especially given the weather. But there are guys like a Tom Hoagie that makes sense at 68 strokes. I mean, even a Jason Day, right? There are guys that I am taking unders on here, but like a Batia. Like I'd be shitting on the over there at 69 strokes. It's nothing against Batia. I love the kid, but he's an inconsistent player to say the least. Sink, I actually bumped him up. He was at 68.5 strokes, so I probably wouldn't take that now. I don't know. Strokes just isn't my favorite board. There's a few guys I like there, but greens and regulation. Oh boy, guys. This is where I think, oh wow, dude, every time I put out a video on prize picks, they get bumped. Every single time. Now they haven't bumped Power up to 5 birdies yet, but I wouldn't wait on it. They already bumped Scott Stallings up to 14 greens. That's unfortunate. I had over 13.5 greens there. Let's just do this now, right? We're going to do a makeup pick. Anyone at 13.5 birdies that's a solid iron player, take the over on. So Matt Kuchar, you can take the over on. Sepp Shanka, you can take the over on. I understand it. I prefer Kuchar because he tees off at 10:40 a.m. So that's a little bit later into the tee times than a Sepp Shanka. But yeah, let's just put Kuchar in there, right? So if you missed out on Scott Stallings, which was the pick that I gave out earlier at 13.5 greens, just go to Matt Kuchar. I think that's more than an adequate replacement there. You could go to Jason Day. I think he makes perfect sense at 13.5 greens. Let's see. Aaron Rye was another player I had at 13.5 greens. He got bumped to 14. So that's, of course, it's only been like 2 hours since I put out my picks, and like half of them have already been bumped. At least the good ones, the ones that I really liked there. So that's a little unfortunate. But yeah, Aaron Rye over 13.5 greens makes plenty of sense there too. And then over here for fairways hit, I mean, the board is priced adequately. That's what I can say about it, right? So the average was 73.6%, which is right around like 10 fairways hit. And most of the guys on the board are a little bit inaccurate. Nobody on here is like an accuracy specialist, I guess, except for McCarthy. He's in the top 10th percentile on tour when it comes to accuracy, him and Kuchar. Even like an Aaron Rye, like he's decently accurate, but he's not an elite accuracy dude. So I think the prize picks may have overpriced the board a little bit when it comes to fairways. So if you're going to do anything, maybe take fades, but I actually haven't bet any fairway props. There's not one that I've actually gotten any exposure to. So there's not really much for me to tell you from that end. Over here with matchups, there's one matchup I want to point out. Actually, there's a couple, okay? Let's do this one. Davis Riley, right? He's normally an opponent versus players, and now they've got him as one of the guys you can bet on. You got to love that. He's playing on Plantation. So for all of the other categories, right, they have guys on Seaside. For the birdie or better board, they have guys on Plantation, right? So there are 2 golf courses. A lot of the guys you see for the Plantation board, I would expect to see tomorrow for the Seaside board, right? For birdies or better, you're going to get them for greens regulation and fairways, I would imagine. So that's a little Easter egg I wanted to point out, right? So like the guys that are on here now, that are on Plantation, like a Kisner, Webb, Harris English, Justin Rose, Thagala, et cetera, that's probably what we're going to have to bet on tomorrow. So keep that in mind. But I love the matchup here, Davis Riley against Nate Lashley. And I mean, I even liked this one, this Sabatini versus Bramlett. I mean, I would take the over here. Sabatini loves himself a short golf course, but yeah, this Davis Riley matchup is just, I think it's absolute gold. But that is all I've got for this stream. Let's see if there's any questions in chat. Looks like there are. Let's see what we've got. Do you post half your plays here and the other half in Patreon? More than half of them are on Patreon. There's, I believe, like 13, 14 props that I have on Patreon. I probably just went over like 4 or 5 there. Yeah, a majority of them are behind the paywall. And then obviously for rounds 2 through 4, that's where I'm posting that stuff. But yeah, I try to give you guys a taste, right? Try to give you some of the rationale behind the picks that I'm taking. So hopefully, you can take that same sort of thought process and extrapolate it over the rest of the board. So yeah, majority of them are behind the paywall. I have to say that. Antonio says, did you talk about Zach Johnson? Yeah, I mean, this is his kind of course, right? So if I like Brian Gay, I don't think you're crazy for playing a Zach Johnson. Same sort of thing. I can't play every dart throw that I want to this week, but yeah, he's certainly on that list. WMG says, also, could you post your slips in Patreon? Yeah, I can't do that. Sorry. I used to do that in the past. People would directly tail my slips, and then it led to a slew of issues. So unfortunately, WMG, I cannot do that. There's rationale behind it. If you'd like it, go ahead. Feel free to DM me on Patreon or on Discord. I'm more than willing to explain it to you, but there's been problems in the past with doing so because people would just like directly tail my slips. And a majority of the time when I would post them, it'd be like half my slips because I only enter, especially at first, like when the board first drops, I enter like half my slips, right? And then as the day goes on, I usually add slips and that kind of thing. It led to confusion. Then people would only tail my slips, right? But for like different dollar amounts. So they'd go like $50 on a slip that I played like 1 unit on. And like $50 for them might have been like 5 units. It's a shit show. I'll tell you in DMs if you need to hear about it. Antonio says Aaron Rye came back tied for 7th. I like him too. So yeah, I took him over there for greens of regulation because it's his sort of golf course, right? Accuracy first, precision sort of player. He's good under wind. So I know, the wind forecast looks relatively benign right now, but if we end up getting nasty conditions, that would only play into his advantage. So yeah, I like him this week. I like him for prize picks. I like him for showdown. I like him for 4-round stuff. He's going well underlooked in my opinion. And yeah, that's all I've got though, boys. So until next time, best of luck. We are going to do some showdown streams throughout the weekend. Wasn't able to do one for Sunday last weekend. Ended up going out with some friends and family on Saturday. So got a little bit tied up there. It's going to happen from time to time. Other big sites and stuff, right? Like they have like multiple content creators. This is my YouTube channel, right? So like I have a life. I'm going to have to go out sometimes with friends. And if that happens, there might not be content, right? I'm a young kid, right? In my 20s, right? I'm going to have some fun from time to time. So keep that in mind. There should be showdown streams for most of the slates, but if you don't see one, I'm probably at the bar with my buddies. just being quite frank with you, right? But yeah, like I said, until next time, guys, best of luck and let's get this cash.